Great. Thanks, Matt, for taking out time. It's really great having you here. I think we've been chatting for a couple of weeks. Really love the amount of energy you bring into this coaching world and also being an amazing athlete. So I thought it'd be great if you could just kick it off with a short introduction, and then we'll just go into a bunch of questions that we want to get your advice on.
Brilliant. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So yeah, Matt Davies, and likewise, it's been brilliant having a chat so far. So looking forward to today. So I run a business called Astute Fitness. We're a coaching business specializing in people that want to do endurance events. So it started out just as Ironman, but I do probably more ultra marathons personally than Ironman. So it's both. But anyone looking to push the limits and go do one of those longer distance triathlons or longer distance runs. And that's it in a nutshell, really.
I think Ironman itself is a long distance race. I think I can't even imagine anything beyond that. And ultra marathon sounds really extremely hard and even very, very scary. That brings me to just understanding sort of what drives you to do these very painful and hard races. What typically keeps you motivated, and also if we were to just boil down to the question on why even do this, right? Why put your body through so much of pain?
Yeah, of course. Look, I think it started only ever with the intention of doing one. It was only ever I wonder if I can go and do that, and I wonder how far I can push, uh, and then I got the bug. But I think what I enjoy most is not. Yes, you're absolutely right. When you're 8 hours in or 12 hours in, or my last race was going to be 36 hours. Actually, I had to miss the last one with injury. But when you're 35 hours in and close to cut off, there are parts that you're perhaps not enjoying in the moment. It gives you on top of the physical achievement of, yeah, you get to the finish line, it's brilliant, you get your medal, you get your photo, and it's actually surprisingly short. That high of finishing probably only lasts about 10 or 15 seconds. So most people would question why put yourself through not just the 36 hours of the race, but the 6 months of training beforehand. And it's, for me, the benefit, it comes from the ongoing inner belief, self-confidence, knowledge that you've reached what you thought and what most people would think is your limit, and you found a way to push past. So it helps with work, it helps with business life, it helps with family life, it helps with all other areas of your life where self-doubt creeps in and it's easy to throw in the towel. It does not build a resilience and an inner confidence and belief that actually they're really, I mean, Ironman have it as a slogan, don't they? Hashtag anything is possible. And when I first saw that, I thought that's just a cheesy marketing line, but it really isn't, because once you've done one, your perception on what you can go out and do is shifting for life. And I don't care if you haven't, even if it's 20 years since you did one, you still carry that little bit of, when times are a bit tough, you still carry that bit of belief, knowing actually I've been through worse and I've put myself through worse and I found a way out of it. So yeah, that for me is the long-term win.
I mean, the only thing that I can't still get past is a 36-hour race. I think would love to know what this is about. And also, you're right on the way Ironman at least creates the whole event, the experience. And what I very fondly remember is the Heroes Hour, where in the last few hours of the race, there's just fireworks all over the place, and it's just amazing and it's very spectacular event to watch through. But yeah, just going back to what is this 36 hours event that you did?
Sorry, what was the last bit?
What was the 36-hour race that you did? I think still can't get past that.
That was an ultra marathon in the UK called the Arc of Attrition, and that one is just running. It's 104
Wow.
mile, which is like 165k, and you start at like midday on the Friday, and you run all the way through the night, and then you run all day Saturday, and then you've got until midnight on Saturday night. So just going into Sunday morning to finish. Sadly, I picked
Wow.
up an injury in training and couldn't do that one, but I've been and supported that one before. My next race is actually slightly longer. My next race is coming up in August. This one is in Africa, so in the
Okay.
jungle. Finish line itself is the equator, and it's 200 kilometers of running with
Wow.
6,000 meters, so about 20,000 foot of elevation change as well. And yeah,
Wow.
you're absolutely right. Ironman do a very, very good, very glitzy kind of feel to their races, and everything's very organized and very slick, and you've got crowds, and you've got. But these events, like the Arc of Attrition or the one that I'm doing in August, that's just you. There's just you and a cow in a field watching you, right? The field gets so spread out, you're barely even running with other runners. It really boils everything down to your ability to problem solve on the way, but also your ability to overcome that overriding desire to stop and rest.
Yeah, I think just with the thought of it, I can just think of there's just so many things that can go wrong, right? On just doing for things for so long, and there must be a lot of things that you're probably unprepared for, or just never foreseen such situations. How do you handle such moments, and what keeps you driving that? Okay, a few more hours, few more kilometers to cross the finish line.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing for me is, and I do this with a lot of my coaching clients, is talking about what is your reason, understanding what's your reason why. If your reason why is,
Mm,
one of my friends has done this race and I'd quite like to be able to brag and say it to him, that's a great motivation for signing up in the first place.
mm,
But when you're 18 hours in and you're dying on your feet and you're in agony, you've got blisters, you've run out of nutrition, you've mistimed when the next aid station is, so you're out of water, or all these kind of things that you're absolutely right can and do go wrong. That reason why is not then strong enough. That is not going to get you
mm.
through dark times. You've got to dig deep down. And really, it becomes almost like life coaching when I'm having these conversations with clients. What's your motivator? For me, it's proving to my daughter, who's 16, about to turn 17,
Wow.
that nothing in life should ever stop you from achieving what you want to achieve. So when I'm in those dark moments, I don't think about, oh, won't it be nice to have a finisher's medal for this race, or the T-shirt looks quite cool, I'd like that. That's too superficial. You've got to then be able to go somewhere in your head to remember, why am I really doing this? What does it say to her if I quit? Look, sometimes you have to. Sometimes you've got to listen to your body. If your leg's hanging off, if something really drastic has happened, there has to be some common sense. But actually, most of the people that quit, they have taken one more step? Absolutely. Okay,
Mm,
so when you take that one more step, have the question again: can I take one more? And most people could still keep going. I think it's the U.S. Navy SEALs. I read David Goggins' books, and most people have heard
yeah,
of.
of course.
I think it was him that said that in the Navy SEALs, they always used to say, once you hit the absolute limit of what you think is possible, you're probably only about 40% of where you can go in their experience. And that I hang on
Mm,
to that. So the more I've done these things, the more I've read and the more I've understood, the more inspiration I get that actually, does it hurt? Yes. Are these blisters terrible? Yes. Will they heal in 2 weeks' time? Absolutely. So can I take another 5 steps, 10
mm,
steps? Can I get to the next aid station? Don't worry about the fact that it's still 112 kilometers to go, but the next aid station is only 7. Can I at least get
mm.
there, get some more fuel and get some plasters on? Maybe then I'll be able to do the next aid station. So yeah, it's about problem solving and breaking it down as you go.
Yeah, it's very I mean very kind of you to break it down to smaller steps, but I know these are very, very large milestones, and it's very inspiring to hear this. And I think do you see any of this experience of you went through as an athlete translated in you into being a coach? And also just would love to understand what pushed you to in being a coach and helping others get into this journey.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest, I've done quite a few Ironmans and quite a few
Mm,
ultramarathons in the last 4 years, but I would absolutely say the hardest thing I've done in the last 4 years is quit my well-paid job. When I signed up for the first Ironman, I was a overweight and well-paid banker in private banking, and I had a very easy
wow.
life. The money used to just land in my account every month, and it was just all that security of a job and all the rest of it.
Mm,
Actually, by far the hardest thing I've done is walk away from that and set up my own coaching business. There's times in that when I really have questioned my sanity. Why did I give up all of
mm,
that money, the security and everything else? So setting up a business is a lot like running an Ironman or running an ultramarathon, there are times when you really don't believe that you're going to get to the end. There are times when it feels like the wheels are falling off spectacularly. But those skills that I learned on the Ironman and on ultramarathons, they definitely come in handy in terms of being able to not panic, problem solve, think on my feet, stay the course. All of those skills absolutely have helped. As for why I like coaching, there's nothing like the first Ironman or your first ultramarathon. After that, you're always chasing the same high, but never quite gets the same buzz, because the first time you do anything is mind blowing and world changing for you. And after that, you may be chasing a PB or running in a new and exotic location or whatever it might be, but you've still done it before, right? So I get such a buzz, particularly on helping people when they're doing it for the first time, because watching them change over the course of 6 months and then seeing them after the race and seeing what they've taken from it is such a buzz for me. So I think that's my favorite bit. I don't only coach first timers. I do coach people who've done one before and want to get a better time or run a longer distance or whatever. But the biggest buzz for me is seeing the transformation people go through when they take on something like this the first time.
I think it's very fortunate to have people like you in the industry. I mean, quit a very well-paying job and getting into this. It's definitely not easy, but I think in the larger scheme of things, just helping people get better, fitter every day, I think that's really great. And I think it's really inspiring on how you've quit everything to get into this. On that note, I think would love to understand, you mentioned that what typically drives you to coach. Any small success stories that you remember of your coaching days when you're training athletes?
Yeah, I mean, I guess because I'm not 21 anymore, so quite a lot of the athletes that I appeal to, I guess, slightly older in year. I've got a guy at the moment who he was a pretty good triathlete in his day, but he'd had a bad car crash about 10 years ago, and initially wasn't even sure he'd be walking again, let alone doing triathlons. But he's slowly been working on his fitness before he came to me, and was back to being outwardly very healthy. But he put a bit of weight on, and he hadn't done a triathlon for 7 or 8 years. So in terms of day-to-day life, he looked like any other human walking up and down the street. But he definitely had this burning ambition to get back to doing triathlons again. So we're currently just about 3 weeks away from him doing Ironman Vitoria-Gasteiz, which is up in the north of Spain. And we reckon he's probably on track to beat his personal best. So he's 52 now. He was 42 the last time he did one. And he's had this 10-year gap with virtually doing nothing, but also a medical reason why he probably was never going to run again, let alone do even 5K. The doctors were like, you're not even going to do that. So for him, massive personal goals, and it's that kind of stuff that really lights my fire. But yeah, he's on track. He's on track as long as all of the prediction models that I use to sort of work out what people's likely finish time is are vaguely accurate. He's on track to do his fastest ever Ironman, which anyone at 52 is pretty good. But 52, having gone through the back surgery and the pain and everything he's gone through, is going to be pretty awesome. So, yeah, wow. He's on track. He's very much on track. He's trained very hard for 6 months, and he looks like he's going to do it. So, yeah, that's a good example.
That's really inspiring. Thanks for sharing it. I mean, it actually reminds me of this other Ironman athlete, Tim Don. He also went through a very insane crash, I think a few days before his Ironman Kona. And he's known as the man with the halo on how he basically came back from it and did an Ironman a few years ago. I think it's very inspiring. I think this is what I think builds the community of triathlons, particularly of amazing stories, beautiful people just pushing their boundaries. That just brings me to a couple of things I think would be great to get some insights on is I'm sure it took you a while to get into ultra marathons or this long distance racing, right? How were your early days of training? How long did it take for you to push these limits, get to where you are? Because often people just, even by the thought of running 100 kilometers, demotivates a lot of people. So if you could just put some practical light into this on how one can achieve it or your own personal journey, I think that'll clear a lot of myths.
Look, absolutely. You can do it in a lot less time than most people think.
Mhm.
Depends how ready you are to go using. I don't play poker, but I know the term. If you're prepared to go all in and put all your chips on the table, then you can do it in 4, 5, 6 months from zero. From zero. So one of my coaching programs, it's called the Zero to Hero package, and it's quite a high touch program, and it is literally when I signed up for my first Ironman only 4 years ago. When I was a kid, I was relatively fit and played a lot of sport and ran a few marathons. But 10 years of being in the corporate job, sitting behind a desk and probably drinking too much at the weekends and eating bad food because I was sat at my desk eating rather than going and getting a healthy salad. It was crappy meal deal from the local shop sort of thing. So I was in bad shape. I was definitely quite overweight. I probably couldn't have run more than 5K if you'd paid me a lot of money. And I went from one of my stories, if you like, on my coaching, all my social media and stuff, is I was that guy. I went from fat banker to Ironman in 4 months.
Wow, that's pretty, I mean, inspiring. In 4 months, it sounds very, but I think it's also the amount of dedication and efforts that you put in. I think often people probably just start, stop, and can't stay for long. What pushed you to stay? I mean, you probably have been doing this for a while, so you're definitely motivated and consistent. What advice would you give someone who is just starting out so that they can at least be consistent on the journey?
Well, as I say, there's two approaches to it, and it does depend very much on your personality type, which one is the right one for you. So I did the all-in method, which is just put all your chips on the table and go all in. But that did take a big chunk of time commitment. So I was probably putting in between 10 and towards the end 15 hours a week of training.
Yeah. Sorry, I just got cut out for a few seconds. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just saying there's basically two different methods of doing this. There's either the all-in method, which I did, and I was fortunate to have a lot of time on my hands to be able to commit to that. So that was a lot of work compressed into 4 months. So I started with doing maybe 10 hours a week, but by the end I was probably doing 15, maybe even a little bit more hours per week of training because I was able to. But not everyone has that level of time. So if you need to commit more gradually, then you need to spread the total length of time out, but doing a little bit less each week and each month and whatever. So it depends on the personality type. But in terms of how you stay motivated, the best way to do it is to sign up before you think about it. If you think about it, there will never be the right time. No, there will never, ever be the right time to go ahead and do this. So sign up. Then tell everyone you know and everyone on social media that this is what I'm doing. You create a lot of self-accountability then. You put it out there to the universe, and then you're on the hook then, right? You don't want to be the one that backs down. And then the third one, if you're struggling, is get some accountability partners. So a coach, if you can afford one, is a great help. But if you can't afford one or that's not the method for you, find training buddies, find groups, find ways of making it so that it's not just you. If you wake up at 5 a.m. on a Monday morning and you've got a run to do and it's just you, and it's either too hot, too cold, raining, snowing, whatever the conditions outside, that's quite hard to drag yourself out of bed and be ready. If you know that your best mate is waiting at the end of the road for you and you've agreed to go out and do that run together, you're a lot more likely. And that's accountability, right? So there's so many communities and accountability methods of running groups, triathlon groups, just your best buddy, whatever it might be. There are so many ways to make yourself accountable. But the best one I found was sign up, post it that day on your social media. I'm doing an Ironman. And I got ridiculed. Everyone I knew was like, you're 39 years old and you're fat and you're out of shape. Like, you can't do an Ironman. And nothing gave me better drive than wanting to prove those people wrong.
That definitely sounds like a great strategy. I think you just sign up, be more accountable, tell people that, okay, I'm going to do this, and at the end of the day, you eventually end up doing it. I think, given that you've been coaching a lot of athletes for a while, I'm sure there are a lot of common setbacks that you might have seen, or if there's a pattern on what do most of these athletes go through, and how do you help them in getting back to track from these setbacks?
Uh, Actually, it's often harder for the people who are doing this spread out over a longer period of time, who can't quite commit to the level of training that I was doing, because
Mm-hmm.
after a while it becomes a hard grind. Um, so keeping motivated and keeping on track when you've been going at it for 4 months and your progression is a bit more gradual, staying motivated is a tough one. It really is. I think the biggest thing that helps those athletes is to keep looking back at where they were at the start. Each day, if we take a tiny step up each day, you only remember in your head the last 3 or 4 days, and it feels like you're not making progress. But we've all seen that graphic on Instagram or on LinkedIn, right, where you look at the little steps and it's zoomed in, and every step looks like a big step, and it looks like you've only come up one step, and then it zooms out, and actually you're 3/4 of the way up the mountain, right? Sometimes you have to look back and remind yourself with photos, with journals, even with recorded conversations that you have at the beginning, and remember how far you have come. So do you want to then fall all the way back down there because you're quitting, or do you want to go that last few yards until you reach the top? So that helps with a lot of people. And that's why having that strong why that we talked about a little while ago is also really powerful,
Yeah.
because when you are getting that, oh God, I've got another week of this, I've got another month of this, it's really powerful to go back to, why am I actually doing this, and remind yourself of that. But those are the two for me that have the biggest possible impact.
Got it. Wow, I mean, definitely, I think motivation is very much a big factor. And like you said, compounding helps. Like if you look at a bird's eye view of how far you've come, I think that typically helps people to stay motivated. And then I have a very interesting question in terms of there's often a lot of debate or very little information on how much of an importance is cross training for endurance athletes, like someone, let's say, doing a marathon. How critical role does, let's say, strength training play into their everyday training? And if it is important, how do you recommend someone get started? How should they look at just managing both of these aspects together?
Yeah, for me, it's absolutely vital, and it goes. And I think back over the years to races I've done, and particularly this year is a great example. The injury I had that stopped me doing the 165k race in January was because all I was doing really was running. It was such a big race that I put all my eggs into one basket, and I started to pick up. And it started as a grumble, and then it got gradually worse. So I had a hip issue and a foot issue, and when I look back at the races I've done best at, and I remember doing London Marathon, God, like 15 years ago. So again, I was doing pretty much just running, ended up with a minor ankle niggle, couldn't run for 2 months. So I got in the pool, and all I did was swam. I swam and swam and swam, and actually I ended up, I'd barely done a run for the last 2 months of training, turned up at the race and did what was then a huge PB. Particularly when you're going into these really long races, the volume of what you're doing is a lot, and there's a huge body of evidence that shows that strength training, proper strength training, prepares your body ready for the rigors, not of race day, prepares you for the rigors of the amount of training you need to do. But from a psychological point of view as well, just getting, if you're going to do an ultra marathon, one bike session and one swim session a week, it just breaks up the monotony of what you're doing, as well as anything. Aside from physically benefiting you because you're working different muscles and building overall strength, but also from a psychological point of view, it's not just going out and pounding the pavements again and again and again. I think that's really key. I do a little bit of work with a charity in the UK as well. They talk a lot about ACL injuries, so anterior cruciate ligament injuries, and kids today are 17 times more likely to have an ACL injury in their teenage years than 30 years ago. And they've done a huge study, And it's down to the fact that kids nowadays get specialised into one sport a lot sooner. You're only good at football, that's it. You get picked up at 6 years old by Man United and put in their under-7s academy, and that's all you do. 30 years ago, certainly 40, 50 years ago, we were out climbing trees and playing outside, and probably if you were any good at sport, you're normally good at all the sports. So the school had you playing rugby, cricket, everything they could get you into. And that made our bodies a lot more resilient. If you over-specialise in one thing and the movement is the same over and over again, the minute your movement makes you go that way, your body's not ready for it. So this study, it was mind-blowing. This is why I've got involved with the charity. It's about building an overall resilient body, and that's where cross-training comes in. But as I say, what it really helps with as well is when you're 12 weeks into a 16-week plan, if all you've done is run, nothing but run for the last 12 weeks, running probably becomes less appealing to you. But getting out on the bike or getting in the sea and doing a sea swim breaks up the monotony. So I think it helps physically, undoubtedly. I think it helps mentally too.
That's a great piece of advice, and like you said, I think cross training typically. I didn't realize until you said it now that it also breaks the routine of just running or doing one thing every day. But yeah, I think thanks for breaking this domain and just telling us how important cross training is, and particularly when it comes to strength training. And I think that brings to the point of just training, right? There's just so much of training you're doing, a strength training, cross training, or running, doing a bunch of other sports. How can you have a balanced life? Like, how do you ensure that your athletes also spend time at work well, with their family, and also balance this training? Any tips, anything that you've seen that work well?
First biggest tip that I swapped is train by time, not by distance. So I don't tell my athletes, right, you have a 50k bike ride to do, because you know roughly this is the pace I'm going to go, but traffic, puncture, all these different things might mean that it takes 2 hours one week and 3 hours the next week. And that starts to make life harder to plan around training. So all my training plans are, today you have a 2 hour bike. I mean, ideally that's going to be about 50k or 60k or 70k or whatever your average pace is, but it's 2 hours, and it'll definitely be 2 hours. So makes life, juggling that around what else you need to do with life, a bit easier. The second big tip is also train early. I mean, no one likes a 5 a.m. alarm clock, right? Well, very few of us like a 5 a.m. alarm clock. Although if you are David Goggins, apparently he doesn't need an alarm clock. He wakes up 20 minutes before regardless, but he's not normal. Life is tough, right? Fitting this in around a job and family and kids and it's not easy. No one's going to pretend that it's easy. But life has a habit of throwing curveballs at you. Your kid comes home from school poorly, or the meeting at work that's meant to finish at 5 minutes finishes at 6:30 instead and stuff. So if you've left your training till the end of the day, you are so much more likely to miss it because something else has got in the way. So if your kids get up at 7 and you've got an hour and a half bike ride to do, get up at 5 and do it. Yes, it might mean going to bed earlier the night before. Get up at 5 and do it. You're finished at 6:30. You're still there to serve breakfast and do your interaction with your kids before they go off to school and you go off to work. It's an adjustment. Okay, that means instead of going to bed at midnight because you've laid there on the sofa watching 5 hours of Netflix, it means going to bed at 9 o'clock. Make sure you still get your 8 hours. The first couple of weeks are hard to adjust, but it gets it done. You are going to have to sacrifice something. Don't sacrifice work time or family time. They're too important. But most of us can find, if we sat down and worked out during the week, how many hours have you spent aimlessly sitting on your phone looking at Facebook? How many hours have you spent watching a crappy series on Netflix that you don't really want to watch, but you watch it because you do? Most of us can all find that time. It's about prioritizing. But yeah, get up. Go before you go to bed, get all of your kit ready. So the bike's there, tires are pumped, nutrition is already on there. All your bike kit is ready. So you can just get out of bed, zero friction, put your stuff on and get straight out the door. And then it's done. And the rest of the day, you'll be amazed actually after a few weeks of doing that. You'd think that means I'm going to spend the whole day at work tired. Quite the opposite. You'll probably be more productive and more full of energy and full of beans when you get in the habit of doing that than you were when you dragged yourself out of bed just in time to get to work and all the rest of it. So yeah, organization and training early are the big ones for me.
You've broken it down really wonderfully, and I think that should help people be consistent. And if you're even after following this, if they're not, then I think they should just go back to the question of why, like you said, why even doing this.
Yeah.
But thanks for this advice, Matt. That's really helpful. Now, just want to talk a little more on the technical aspects of it. Like I often keep reading a lot about VO2 max, how it affects your, let's say, running performance. There are different VO2 max for each kind of endurance activity. What do you think about, like, if you can just break it down on what is VO2 max and how does it impact the athletic performance? And any particular workouts you would recommend usually to your athletes that help them improve their VO2 max, if at all that is important?
Yeah, I mean, VO2 max, quite simply, it's a measure of your body's ability to utilize the oxygen that's coming in. So the better the VO2 max, the better you're able to, if you're bringing in 100 litres an hour of oxygen, you can use that more efficiently. If your VO2 max starts to go up, it means you can achieve more output for the same amount of VO2 that you're taking in. And it's a very good measure of how fit you're becoming, first and foremost, in the moment. But it is also the most accurate predictor of long life. The better your VO2 max score, the longer you are likely to live. More than any other measure, weight loss or BMI or any of these measures, VO2 max is the most accurate measure of how long you're likely to live. So improving your VO2 max isn't just going to help you run a faster marathon, it's going to help you live longer. So that's a pretty important thing for people to get their head around as well, I think. As for how you improve it, consistency and persistency improves it. Most people make the mistake when they do their long runs of running too quickly. You need to slow down and make sure you're running in zone 2 and helping your body to get good at using your aerobic endurance system. The body's got 3 different endurance energy systems. The key with training is not to go out and do 5 runs a week, all at roughly the same pace. You go out and run probably one really long run at a pace that feels like you're almost walking. Your heart rate's got to be right down in zone 2. Everyone does these runs too quickly, but the key is to slow down to get faster. But then there would be set training, the set sessions in your program where you're pushing your VO2 max. So they're threshold interval sessions where you're holding lactate threshold ability for a bit longer and longer each time. So you're working the 3 different energy systems. If you just go out and run, you're not really working any of the systems. You're using them all a little bit, but you're not really testing any of them. So the key in training is to break them down. So you've got some really high intensity ones that are working more strength, but also working your top end. Some really long, slow, probably quite boring sessions where you're working your aerobic endurance system. And then when you put it all together on race day, you've pushed each of the 3 systems in a different way. The sum of the parts is greater than the individual bits on their own. Most people just go out and do, well, I can run 10K at the moment, I want to run 40, so I'm just going to, over the next 16 weeks, I'm just going to run at the same pace, but run a little bit further each time. It doesn't really work. It does work, but it doesn't work as well as if you have some real variety in your training and have different sessions that have got different focuses. But the biggest one...
Sorry, please go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, the biggest one is Eliud Kipchoge, by far the greatest marathoner who's ever lived. He runs like 80% of his miles at a pace that you and I could probably keep up with, which is the equivalent of you walking. He runs a lot of his miles at minute miles, which many kind of amateur athletes could just about chug along with. The difference with him is when he's the other 20%, when he's pushing it, we would struggle to sprint for 100 meters at that pace, and he can do that for 10K. So it's about variety in your training is the key.
Got it. I mean, thanks for this advice. And you brought up a very interesting aspect of like different zones and different energy systems that our body use. Now, zone two is obviously it's slow, it's boring, and it requires a lot of discipline and patience. How much of a time do you think someone should spend on in zone two? Let's say they're doing 2, 3 runs a week. How would they manage their calendar to have zone two in it?
Sure. It changes as you get closer to the race. So typically a training plan is divided into 3 chunks. The first chunk, you spend nearly all of your time in zone two, building
Mm-hmm.
what coaches call your aerobic base. So you're literally just building your endurance base, and it's a relatively boring phase because whether you're running on the bike, a bit less so with swimming, but you're just chugging along at a pace that probably feels too slow for you. For example, if your 5K time is 20 minutes, so you're running at 4-minute kilometers, your zone two runs should be no faster than 6 minutes a kilometer. Well, if you're capable of running at 4 minutes a kilometer, 6 minutes a kilometer feels like you've stopped and sat down and had a cup of tea, right? It feels mind-numbingly slow, but you have to do that. So in those first, let's say it was to keep the numbers round, let's say it was a 3-month training plan. For that first month, you absolutely do almost 100% of your stuff at that level. But for the final month, you're doing a lot more sessions where you're doing strength work. And by strength work, I don't mean in the gym doing strength, but strides, intervals, hill work, where you're working at a much higher zone, probably 4 and 5 for quite a bit of that. And that would probably be maybe 50% still doing zone two, but 50% as much as, maybe not quite 50, but a big chunk where you're doing those higher zone workouts. And then the middle one is roughly in between. You're just transitioning slowly. And that's where you build the aerobic base in the first place, and then you gradually work on the other areas. And then, as I say, that's when you add all the parts together, you've built yourself something that's greater than the individual pieces.
Got it. That's interesting. Thanks for sharing it. And I think last question on this topic and also overall is that the wearables are getting smarter. Garmin is building a bunch of amazing watches, and so is Apple. What do you think is the future of this endurance coaching or training when it comes to these wearables, and how much of data, what role does data play in your coaching system? Like how often do you look at it? What all you track? If you can just share more on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, look, data is invaluable, absolutely invaluable. It gives us more and more ability to coach. And particularly for me, I coach remotely. I coach athletes all over the world. So I'm entirely reliant on not entirely, largely reliant on data. And the more accurate that data becomes, the more accurately you can coach someone, obviously. And it can be, where it's the really exciting bit for me is it's getting really good at detecting things like heart rate variability, which can detect underlying health issues before they come about. So that stuff's really exciting. Tracking your sleep, tracking you building that into your training. If you've had a week where you've had really poor sleep, the coach really should be pulling down the amount of training volume that week because you're not in a position to push as quite as hard. So you're tweaking the plan as you go. And there are various AI-powered training plans now. I use one myself with my coaches where that sifts through that data far more accurately and far more quickly than any coach can ever do. But I still don't believe that that's going to replace coaches. There will be a small number of people who are happy to rely entirely on the data and the algorithm and the AI program and entirely rely on that to do their coaching for them. But the vast majority of people who need a coach because they're struggling with the accountability, they're struggling with the knowledge, the questions, they want a personal interaction, they want all of that. So AI enhances that relationship. I don't think for most people it will take it away. But there will be some people who go, yeah, and actually, because it's a lot cheaper, I'm just quite happy to have the AI program do all of that for me. But yeah, its ability to get more and more accurate data and then tweak your program. So the platform I use for Ironman coaching, if I set you Monday a 60-minute zone 2 workout and you 10 minutes into the run, you bump into your mate who's doing hill intervals and he talks you into joining him and you can't resist. So you do an hour and a half of sprints up and down a hill. You come back, you finish, you hit your watch, the watch uploads the data. Straight away the program, before I even look at it that night, the program's already recognized, instead of 50 stress points of stress on your body, you've now done 130. Straight away it will look at tomorrow's workout and maybe go, well, you had a 60-minute zone 2 bike, let's make that 45 minutes instead. So it's doing that before I even get to look at it. Literally, I sit there at night and look through the athlete's data, and it might have already changed it if you did that run in the morning. So that's where it's helping me. It's AI is helping me, and the wearables and the more accurate data that we're getting helps me as a coach. But I still need to sit and have that conversation with the athlete and say, look, you already had a hard run on Sunday. What on earth are you doing going out and doing hill sprints today? Because you greatly risked an injury. That would have set us back 3 weeks. That would have meant we were getting close to race day and you hadn't done the right prep. So it still needs that human interaction. So it aids the relationship with the client, I find. But yeah, the enhancements in what's coming is phenomenal. The platform I use is about to launch a program where you do your strength training with your phone in the corner with the camera on watching you, and it's constantly assessing your posture. So it will work out, hang on, actually, this athlete is slightly quad dominant rather than hamstring dominant. I need to start changing his strength plan so that we work on his hamstrings a little more, so that we bring him back into balance. That kind of stuff is phenomenal. And even a personal trainer in the room might not quite spot that. A good one might, but not all would even spot that. But the camera and the AI and the algorithm is going to be more accurate at doing that than a human. That's the kind of exciting stuff. That's the bit where it will tweak your program for you. And over the next 3 months, you'll no longer become quad dominant, and that'll mean you're less likely to get injured when you're doing your training. So yeah, it's phenomenal. It's exciting.
I think one thing you said that I also completely resonate, and what we are also building here that's perfect is the coach has to be central, and AI can just be a sidekick that assists the coach in doing his or her job relatively easier. But the entire industry runs on personal touch, accountability, that human interaction that motivates people. I think that's going to stay. I don't believe at all that AI is going to ever replace coaching.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Matt. I think these are the few questions I had. I really appreciate you for being very patient and walking us through this and sharing your advice. It really was fun recording this and learned a lot about this world of endurance today.
Brilliant. Awesome. It's been great. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much.